and welcome to the Rainbow Umbrella, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything under the rainbow. This month I am joined by the fabulous Jacqueline Bublitz, who is an author of two very wonderful books that I have just read for the second time, Before You Knew My Name and Leave the Girls Behind. Welcome, Jacqueline. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited that we managed to make this happen.
Yes. And so where am I talking to you from today?
I've just got back to New Plymouth in Taranaki, which is where I'm essentially based these days. I've just been in Melbourne and Sydney for a couple of weeks for work, for the business side of things. And now I'm back to New Plymouth where I write my books. And my publishers are over in Australia. So yeah, you were talking to me from upstairs above a cafe on this very chilly day.
Yeah. Oh, so you're cold coming back from Oz then?
Yeah, if I can't quite see it. Well, no, because Melbourne was freezing as well. People never think of Melbourne as cold because it's, they see on the news that it's on fire or something. Not to make light of their horrible summers, but no, it was freezing over there as well. But yeah, I've got the manga is, you can't really see because there's a building, but if that building was not there, I'd be able to look straight out at the manga. So
oh wow,
there's some snow on him today.
Yeah, I've just come back from Central and there was snow around there as well, and it was thank
I
goodness
love
for fires.
Yeah, indoor flies. Yes, I love winter. It's like I'm the only person who's gleeful at the moment. All my family and friends are just so mournful, and I'm like, this is the best season ever.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you don't look convinced either.
I just
people could see your face right now. You're like, oh, well, and that concludes the interview with our eccentric author. No, I've always loved extreme. That's a terrible thing to say in current climate crisis. Extremes of weather. I've always so I don't love extremes of weather. I love if it's really warm or really cold, just be something.
Yeah.
Don't be in the middle. A bit like my personality, maybe.
No, that's fair. I'm not a fan of the cold.
No,
and
you can join the most of the people I know.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that, as the years have gone, I'm feeling the cold more, which is really frustrating because I hate being cold.
Might not last in terms of
no.
Hot and cold flushes, just to say, as an elder statesman. But listen, it's like, you're not supposed to talk about the weather, but I'm not actually somebody who enjoys talking about the weather. Like, I don't know. It's just so, it's evocative. I like writing about it too.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a thread that we can pull on later. But we are here to talk about you and your two fabulous books, and if we can, the third that's in progress, without giving away any spoilers. So as I said, the two books that you have released so far are Before You Knew My Name and Leave the Girls Behind. And I devoured them for the first time over my Christmas break last year. I'm a fast reader anyway, but this is going to sound like I'm kissing ass. But honestly, it was like 2 days each.
I love that.
I was in there. Yeah.
I know that, reading it, it's like, how do people find time? But in my ideal scenario, when I was writing, especially the first book, someone would read it on an airplane. So, when they're sort of that locked in, can't really go anywhere, and just be absorbed in these people's worlds. Like, I wanted it to have that sort of closed in feeling, so that you sort of come up for air at the end and think, what was that? So yeah, 2 days is good.
Yeah. And I just reread them again before this, and I'm a big rereader, but this was the first time I did tabs in the book, which was really exciting. So
you do the little stick? Like, I just bend down the page. I do. Your face again, everybody. I bend. It's a sign of love, not aggression. I bend down, was it dog ears? But then the coolest thing is going back maybe a couple of years later and go, what was on that page that resonated so much that I've passionately creased to the point of almost ripping the corner of the and then I'm like, I don't see a single thing on this page that resonated. So it's quite it gets if you're using tabs and you can actually go back and see what it was that you at the time, what meant something to you. There's probably a smarter way than me going, what was going on in my brain at that point.
I kind of love that though. I mean, for me, dog earing is a no-no, but I also respect everyone's...
I got that from your reaction.
No, I can't hide my feelings, apparently. My face is an open book.
I like it.
But I also respect,
guys.
no, I respect your right to do what you will with your own books. So that's fine.
I don't borrow other people's books, and I don't anymore. Probably for that reason, I don't so often get library books out anymore. I used to, but
Yeah.
no. So I buy books, I deface them with love, and then wonder later what was I thinking?
I like the idea of going back, rereading again in a few years or whatever, and going back and be like, okay, what resonated with me then? Why doesn't it resonate with me now? Like approaching that from an almost academic point of view. Like,
well, it's an occupational hazard now. I mean, I probably did it before, but now reading is quite cerebral, I suppose, as opposed to like emotional. And so if I read a book that I really, as opposed to reading for work, which I will hopefully enjoy as well, but if I read a book of my choosing, I tend to read it really quickly, like in a night, just because I don't have much time to read. And probably that's when I might go back a year later and think, what was I working on that made me think of, that loved the sentence structure, or who was I in love with that broke my heart? So I really love this tragic line over here. And now I'm just like rolling my eyes at the person I used to be. So I do that. And the other times, just looking at one of the hardcovers, if I get a hardcover, the thing I do is I take the sleeve off. So I don't think that's unusual. I have the so that I just have the actual hardcover with like the embossed writing on the side and stuff. I would have, if I could, just like a whole shelf of like old school hardcovers, but without the paper sleeves.
Yeah, I do that as well, because if the sleeve gets hurt, then I get sad. So.
I just I mean, I understand that, but I do it because of the aesthetic of, I love the look of, I guess maybe it reminds me of old school books. From my childhood.
No, I appreciate that as well. But yeah,
the sleeve gets hurt.
The sleeve gets hurt.
Sorry, sleeves.
No, books are my drug of choice. So I don't have kids, books are my kids next to my cats.
Yeah,
I'm sounding like a crazy person now, but
no, you're not. If books are your drug of choice, it makes you sound quite healthy. And cats instead of kids makes you sound quite sensible. So,
well, thank you for that.
With all love I'm an auntie and a great auntie, and it's my favorite. It's my favorite role. But I'm not. I don't have my own kids either, so I don't have cats either. Slinky things. I wouldn't mind one, but I travel a bit too much.
Yeah, it is a bit of a pain when you have to travel, especially when I've got a black cat called Salem, and he's very needy.
Oh, that is an exceptional name for many reasons. Yes. Both the witchy thing and also the fact that I was obsessed with Days of Our Lives as a kid, which is set in Salem, not Massachusetts, just Salem. No one knows where, somewhere with a dock and a lot of organized crime. So what an amazing name, and I may have to borrow it.
Amazing. Okay. Organized crime, that's kind of a nice segue into not organized crime, but maybe true crime.
True crime,
which is a big theme in the two of your books. So I'm going to start with the one I read first, which was Before You Knew My Name. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down a couple of themes and some things that I wanted to pull on about that. So I've got exploitation and grooming, victim blaming, true crime exploitation, how stories are told, respect for the dead and victims, and responsibility for defending yourself. Where does this sit? So there's a few things that we can kind of pull on
lighthearted.
Yeah, just lighthearted.
Sitcom-esque, yeah.
Full disclosure, I am a gender studies student, so your books really resonated with me from that perspective. I was like, that's where most of the tabs are coming from. I'm like, oh, yes, this, yes, this, yes,
brilliant.
this.
I've always wanted to be more academic in my understanding of gender. I'm a layperson's gender studies major. Yeah.
I can definitely recommend studying it if you're interested, or even just we could go on for ages about.
Yes, please. Sorry, everybody, we're just going to talk about me finally going into higher education.
Yeah, we've changed the topic of this podcast now.
Be your best self. Okay. Works for Oprah and Jacinda. We can do it.
Absolutely. I mean, you've already written 2 books and working on a 3rd, so arguably you're up there already.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the first one I have is exploitation and grooming. So before we get into these, I guess it might be a good idea to run down kind of the general plot of these books. So listeners who haven't read them will have an idea of what we're talking about with a little bit of context. So they're your stories. Do you want to give a brief summary of Before You Knew My Name?
Sure. So Before You Knew My Name is a story of the connection that forms between a young murder victim, Alice Lee, and the woman who finds her body, Ruby Jones. So they arrive in New York City on the same day, but they never meet. It's a month later that Ruby, who was in her 30s, finds the body of Alice, who's just turned 18, on the banks of the Hudson River. That's not a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read it yet. That's the premise of the book. And the what I like to call the gentle twist of the story is that it's narrated by Alice herself after her death, as we learn more about who she was, how she came to be in New York City, and then through her, I guess, for want of a better term, otherworldly connection with Ruby. We then also go into the mystery of who murdered her and why that matters. So there's a backstory that we learn slowly but surely about Alice and how she came to be 18, just turned 18 on the day she arrives from a small town in the States. She's from Wisconsin. I wanted it to be Michigan, but they didn't have the right laws around things like what we call it, like statutory rape, and I don't actually, they didn't have the right laws for me for the book, so I shifted her to Wisconsin, which is a place I've only driven through, and so the grooming part, if you have questions about that, but that comes into what happened in her past. Although throughout the entire story, as we are leading up to the circumstances of her murder, there is sort of this, I hope, a dark or sort of a threat looming over anybody that she comes to rely on as a young woman in New York who may or may not have harmed her.
Yeah, and I mean, those things come through quite powerfully. And just thinking about the exploitation and grooming angle, I really like the way that you told that story, but you told it from her perspective. And, even though she's passed on when she's narrating this story, she's still kind of learning in that space as well. She starts with, oh, I thought this relationship was okay because you know what it's like when you're a teenage girl and your teacher's attractive. I can I can logically understand that. But then as she tells that story, she starts to understand, well, actually, maybe this is what happened. This is how we got to that point. And I think that comes across really well.
Well, thank you. I mean, there's a scene that I'm just thinking of near the end, where it's very small, the sort of click where she realizes, I think realizes fully, as opposed to sort of there's this, I always think that change happens very slowly, then all at once. So it's a slow process and then often bang. And I think that's what happened with Alice when she realizes, again, without spoiling too much, what really the character, as in the essence of this man that she had been in a relationship with back in Wisconsin. But I also, I mean, an inevitable question that I get like all the time is, well, which character are you, or which experiences did you, and I always say all of them and none of them in equal measure. And so I have not, I'll put that out there, I have not had a relation, I would never was in that, I never found myself, I was going to say put in that, I never found myself in that position. I do have friends who have both been incredibly manipulated by those kinds of situations, and also a couple of friends who have had relatively what they would describe as healthy relationships as they got into their late teens with older people in positions of authority. So I lent into that, the complexity of how you would view that at that age, and deliberately 17, about to turn 18, so on the cusp of feeling like I think you feel like you know it all, and how easy it is, I think, to assume that you've got a level of control that you just don't have when a person has all of the power in the relationship, even if they're not exercising it on the daily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the age discrepancy as well. I remember when I was a teenager thinking, how do they go 6 foot and bulletproof? I'm not even 5 foot. So,
yeah. No, I'm like 5'4" who thinks she's 5'7" or something.
yeah. But, when you're a younger person and you're experiencing all these things for the first time, you do have that kind of, oh, no, I know what I'm doing. I know what this is about. You can't necessarily even comprehend that the person in the position of power might be manipulating you in some way
Absolutely.
until you're past that point where you're like, oh, actually, hold on. I've clicked now.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think we have very, I don't talk about this often, but it just makes me think about how we have, even for ourselves, quite sometimes a narrow view or perception of what it means to be a victim. So if we are somebody who's considers ourselves really strong and we've gone through a lot and we're very aware, then we find ourselves in situations that it's often not till you're out the other side that you think, whoa, I was really taken advantage of there. I really, you know, this was not a healthy situation for me, but I didn't view it as such because there wasn't there wasn't harm. I'm using air quotes there. There wasn't a harm that I might have seen enacted upon other people, in their relationships or in their households, or in the media with sort of stranger danger crimes. And so for Alice, like she was never Alice Leah, 17, then turns 18 protagonist. She was never going to think of herself as a victim because she'd only been given very narrow parameters around what being taken advantage of meant. And then I think had she been allowed to live longer, she would have become even more righteous about about her experiences, and she would have been a really interesting young woman to follow. I talk about her like she's real,
Yeah.
because she is real to me.
Yeah. And you definitely get that feeling had she been, allowed to
Yeah.
continue her life, you could see the kind of woman that she would grow into from the way
Yeah.
that she's telling her own story.
Yeah, just a little. I love the thing about Alice for readers who haven't met her yet, or is that she's like kind of a little bit crass and rough around the edges, and I can't help it. I write so many of my characters have that. There's that New Zealandness, that Kiwiness, that I don't know, Wahine Toa. I don't know. There's something about them, and then and so there's a strength. There's a little bit rough around the edges. She's not a cookie cutter character, that's for sure. And I don't think I can try as I might. I can't write. But in my second book, Juno is my favorite to just lean into the teenage girl. I love writing I love writing teenage girls. And um, just how they're just they're just who they're just the ones that I write, and they're just and the ones that I have known, they're just who they are completely. And maybe a bit of wishful thinking because I'm not entirely sure I was like that as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, no, that definitely comes through and across the two books. And I think Wahine Toa is a perfect way to describe
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Just there's a strength, and then on top of that, I mentioned that there's a little bit of American, oh gosh, but like the crassness and stuff's a little bit sort of not fully educated about the most of my friends, bless them, who I went to school with in Michigan didn't have passports, or they didn't, and here's me and who's moved across the world to their little town, and most of them had never gone anywhere except maybe a trip or two to Florida, and not because of not because they couldn't travel for and I went on a scholarship, so I know that plenty of people can't travel because of economic means, but not because of economic means, because of potentially just a lack of I'm going to use the word curiosity here, like a lack of curiosity about the rest of the world. And then so I loved with Alice was like, well, what if she had the curiosity but didn't have again the framework or the parameters around how to explore the world? And so she meets this man Noah, who's so she's always asking him questions like, tell me about New York, tell me about all the languages spoken, how many hospitals are there, how many, she just wants to sponge everything up. So that was really fun to write as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, that leads us nicely into the next point that I have written down, which is victim blaming. So, that is, again, something that comes across in both of the stories, but in this one in particular, because of that relationship that Alice had. And, you explore that a little bit in the story. How important was it for you to have that message come across that victim blaming is not okay?
So important, but also so intrinsically part of who I am and how I feel about justice in the world, that I didn't really have to think about it too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I acknowledge Alice herself. She thinks about, and I'm using air quotes again that no one could see, the perfect victim. And she's fully aware, as a dead girl who's being talked about in the media, how precarious the attention is that's been given to her case, and how precarious that is if they were to know, for example, about her past relationship with an older man in a position of power, those things that we just talked about. If they were to know that, if she wasn't white and blonde, and she's well, Ruby, who's found her body, is starting to learn, as I was, learning more about things like missing white woman syndrome, which is that was a term coined by a PBS journalist, Gwen Eiffel. I don't never know if I say her surname correctly, around and once you see it, you can't unsee the fact that who gets the attention in the media when they go missing, like Gabby Petito, Madeleine McCann. These cases should have the attention that they get, but there's so many other cases that don't get the same amount of attention because of the melanin of the of the person who's gone missing. And so I was learning about that. Alice, my character, was learning. Ruby was learning about that. So there was the academic side, which was around victimology and the things that I was learning, and in particular for Leave the Girls Behind, around like terms like the less dead people that we consider less. When I say we, whether it's the media, the police, the general public considers, again, air quotes, less dead than others, because they had their life was considered to have less value while they were still alive. So I was learning about that, and then I was learning about the cultural, the missing white woman syndrome. All these things sort of were keeping me awake at night, and I realized I was already writing towards this idea of, hey, like look at what we lose. When this happens to anybody, look at the impact that it has on the person, and in particular in the second book, on the person's like the people around them, and so it became, I had to be really careful for it not to be a polemic or it's some kind of essay or my sort of submission to try and get into gender studies, to try and sneak my way into a master's or something, even though I don't even have a bachelor's. Like a bachelor's degree. So I like a lot of my work is like pulling back from these things I get really excited to learn more about and to share, and then working out, well, in a real life dinner, at the dinner table or having a glass of wine, how much of my friend's attention could I keep before they roll their eyes and go, no, okay, no, like we need to start like talking about something else now, because this is just far too political. So yeah, that's the balance for me is, but I am in that old school feminist, saying the personal is political. So that's always resonated with me, even if I haven't had a full academic understanding of what they meant by that.
Yeah, but you're a person that exists in the world, right?
Yeah.
The personal is political 100%. And
Yeah.
I thought immediately when you were talking about, that dinner table korero, it's like, okay, I respect people's right to not necessarily engage in a conversation that they don't want to be a part of or feel uncomfortable for whatever reason. But it's also important to have those big conversations. And so how do you find the balance between that? Because you have to get your message across, but also be respectful of the people that are your audience, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I went last night to be like Billy. It's a cabaret. I need to let me can you pause for a second while I look up the guy's name? It's because I want to be respectful of like this.
Yes.
So I went last night, and you come and say we have the cabaret festival on, and it'd be like Billy, which is, am I saying his name right? Rutene Spooner, and he was what an incredible entertainer. And the way that I cried through the whole thing last night, because it was, it begins as this homage, and this is young kid who's obsessed with Billy T. James, and through the old VHS tapes that he'd seen, and then he becomes a, for want of a better term, an impersonator. That was a big thing, right, in the 80s and early 90s of just being Tina Turner or being like, and being Billy T. And then there's a slow dawning toward the end of the cabaret show around, but is it funny? What did it say to a young kid about his identity? And were some of the personas that Billy T. James was required to, well, I don't want to say put the word required in there, but some of the personas that Billy T. James performed or had out there, were they all funny, or have we changed in terms of what we find amusing? And the way that he did it last night was just, it was beautiful, and it was pin drop silence in the audience, because he'd taken everybody from this really sing along fun, laughing about all the things that those of us who are old enough remember from that era. Also really quite poignant and meaningful. It made me miss my dad, because we used to watch the show. I guess it was probably on a Saturday night. Yeah, we would watch the variety shows, and Billy T. James, yeah, his own show. And then there's this realization that it was reflective of the times, and we're a little more aware now of what it is and isn't. I'm gonna say it's not even appropriate. It's just like what is and isn't kind, nice, okay, funny, thoughtful. And he did it so beautifully. And at the end, I was like, oh, I think I just need to go and like put my face down and have a massive cry. Because it is possible to entertain and get your point across at the same time. It's a very delicate balance, and so it really made me inspired to get back to my third book, because I waver sometimes with, like any writer, like, this is hard work, this is slog, trying to get the draft out. But the actual privileged position that any kind of artist has to say to people, hey, like, I'm gonna make you feel safe, I'm gonna like make you feel comfortable, and then I'm gonna tell you something that might make you feel uncomfortable, and I'm gonna like trust that you're going to sit with me and stick with me, because I'm not lecturing, I'm not trying to like cause harm. And I'm actually all for those people, by the way, who are out there like shouting with megaphones and stuff, and like the Greta Thunbergs of the world. Yeah, I'm all for that as well.
Yeah.
I love that, but the space that I have decided that I'm comfortable in is that sort of a gentle nudge, and then may just keep flicking at people's conscience and say like, okay, now that I've got you like entertained or wondering who done it, let me talk to you about what all this shit actually means.
Yeah, and that's something that is woven beautifully throughout the stories. You've got, the simple, I'm using air quotes now, the simple act of,
Yep. I bequeath you my air quotes.
Oh, thank you. Of, Alice telling her story, but she's also teaching you something, and you're learning along with her at the same time, and with Ruby as well.
Yeah, and I hope that I can continue to do that without sort of, I try to find aspects of gendered crime in particular. That's the area that I'm focused on, at least for my first three books. I try to find aspects of it and then widen the lens, but then also like really narrow it to this like fine point as well. And so we're never telling stories that haven't been told before. I mean, I'm acutely aware of, there's some highly original writers, but it's quite rare to find highly original stories. It's just the way they choose to tell those stories. And then, yeah, I have a team, and we work together. Nobody tries to mute me, or it's me making sure that I can, if I've got someone's attention for 2 days, like what a gift. What can I say? And some people think I don't go far enough, and I get reviews sometimes that are a little bit huffy of like, well, that's not feminist enough. And then another one of my all-time favorites was from someone whose gender show doesn't need to be probably named here, saying, well, this is why feminists shouldn't write books, all in capital letters. And so like I've kind of found that like sweet spot in the middle of two sets of expectations, and then I have some fun, leaning into like, how much can I get away with here, because I'm a white privileged cis hetero black woman. I'm from New Zealand, so like I've got a lot of things going for me. I've got a lot of privilege, and I'm not going to sort of try and write someone else's trauma or try and appropriate it. All I can do is say, hey, this is a lot of my lead characters or the characters who share sort of that sort of lead role are observers. And that's very deliberate. So they're observers, and they're learning about these things.
Yeah, and that's a good segue, but I'm going to pull on that thread in just a second, because I want to jump to Leave the Girls Behind now. And one of the main things I drew from that story is telling people stories, if you're no longer around to tell your story, who has responsibility for that story? Who can caretake that story? And I think that was done really, really well in this book, because you've got the dynamic between the girls and the woman that's telling their story. And I think that's really beautiful. So do you want to give a quick synopsis of this story?
I'll leave the girls behind. Yes. So this one is about Ruth Ann Baker. She was a citizen detective, armchair detective. She's sworn off true crime for reasons that will soon become apparent to the reader. But she finds herself drawn back into that world of being an armchair detective when a little girl goes missing from her former hometown, and it happens to be the same place that Ruth Ann, or Ruthie as they call her, her own best friend, was kidnapped and murdered in that same town 19 years ago when Ruth and Beth were 7 years old. And this eerie parallels between the two cases, even though the perpetrator of that case 19 years ago is long dead, leads Ruth to believe that there may have been more than one person involved in the crimes committed against Beth, her little best friend. And so it allowed me to explore the world of people orbiting, for example, a serial killer or a mass murderer, or child killer. Like, how does a person get to a point that they are able to do the things that they do? And also, why are we then so obsessed with blaming, for example, the wife for not knowing? But also underneath that is like, oh, hang on a minute, how did she not know? Like, how scary is that to consider that you don't know the person climbing into to bed next to you has been committing these heinous crimes? Or how does the mother not know? Or how does, and what lives are, and all of my perpetrators, and it did like I'm writing about a very specific type of crime, so I'm writing about male perpetrators, and they are, for the most part, and especially a lot of the serial killers, the Ted Bundys and the other ones that I don't want to even name, they have lives. They have girlfriends and partners and children or stepchildren, or they perform roles in the community. They dress up as clowns at children's parties, and they, what's going on in their world that enables them to completely and utterly deceive everybody. Or do they? So yeah, and then it kind of, yeah, and then there's layers and layers. So that's the hook, or did this perpetrator have partners in crime, and was that partner were those partners in crime potentially women? So that's the kind of the twist of that story. But then it delves into what happens to the girls, the less dead, the girls who have been murdered, but they didn't get the attention. Their perpetrators haven't ostensibly been identified. Why is that? What happens to you if you were here and then you're gone and no one pays attention to where you went, or how you were murdered? So yeah, there's layers and layers to that one as well. It's a natural progression from Before You Knew My Name, a little bit more crimey, very technical term, a little bit more crimey than the first one.
Yeah, and you go to multiple locations as well and explore the way that different places intersect with those things that you've just spoken about. And I keep coming back to the victim blaming and pulling on what you said before about the people that know the people that perpetrate these crimes. They're often victims too, or are they?
Yep. Yeah.
How do we dissect or discuss the aspect of them being a victim, or how much are they a perpetrator along with the person that they know or are in a relationship with?
A lot of so sort of my this love affair that I was having when I was writing Leave the Girls Behind was with bias and unconscious bias, and also perhaps unsurprisingly in this day and age, conspiracy theories and how they take hold. We were just coming out of the pandemic when I started writing this, and obviously then the re-emergence of Donald, that one, he who shall not be named. No, I don't use that reference very often anymore either.
It's just all going wrong, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Separate episode.
Yeah. I don't know. It's thinking, like, how do you ask a nuanced question if you're coming at it with bias. And so is it inherently, wrong to ask, how did this person not know? No. So say, let's say the wife of a serial killer. No. But if you're like, well, how did they not know? Like, that's different than, well, how did this person not know? Like, coming at it from a point of judgment or coming at it from a point of curiosity, because there's evidence there. There's things to learn about how these men, the types of men that I'm writing about, how they can move through the system and sometimes even get arrested for things, but just get let go because they're a family man, or they've got like, what the fuck is that conversation going on when they get back home? Or, what is the dynamic in the home? Is it that's a paternalistic, patriarchal, he's the ruler, so you don't ask any questions? I'm surmising here, but like, how do you not, how do you, like my coupled up friends, the partner comes through the door, like sort of falls through the door and tells their partner everything about their day. They know each other's workmates, even though they don't work in the same places. They dislike the same bosses, like their partner's boss, or they're like, there's my understanding of being a couple is very different than what potentially was going on in those households. So I'm curious about that without judgment. But it's impossible, I think. It's almost impossible, and I know this, to come at things without judgment. It's about how you grapple with that.
Yeah, well, the natural question in those situations is how, right? But it's how you go about asking the how or why,
Yeah, because I think it's the question that gets asked way too much at the expense of how is what. So what did he do? And how, like, I was watching a 60 Minutes interview, Australian 60 Minutes, the other night with my mum, and it was about the Madeleine McCann, who I mentioned before, and it was talking about a young woman's assault, and it went into far too many details. Don't like we get it, that this is heinous, and the questions that were being directly asked, I just thought they were really irresponsible questions, not just for the young woman who's being interviewed, but for the viewers. Do they actually need to know the what? I mean, yes, to a degree, you need to know, but the how and the why and all those things is so much more important to me than the what this person the detail behind the how and the why is more important to me than the detail of the what. I think that probably comes through quite clearly in my books as well.
Absolutely. And it's almost like you can see my notes in front of me, because that leads beautifully into the one, I guess, meaty topic that we could probably, again, do a whole episode on its own. But true crime exploitation. Obviously, you're an author in the true crime space. You're telling these stories beautifully. They are victim-centric. There's not really... not really anything that I could fault with them. Again, I'm not ass kissing, but like
no, that's really, thank you.
The way that the stories are told. Well, they're wrong.
Thank you. Wow. Yes.
But I mean, how do you personally navigate that space? Because there is so much critique at the moment about true crime and exploitation of the people's stories, and there's the stereotype. It's like, oh, girls love true crime, wine and crime, and I would argue that I'm a part of that stereotype. I've done 2 episodes that I called Wine and Crime, I have friends that we engage in this content, even though it's horrible. But how do you navigate that, I guess, narrowing space between interest in education and exploitation?
That's a good question, and I actually don't get asked that very often. So thank you. I think there's 2 versions of this answer, because my experience with the first book is so very different than the second. So the first book, I did not know it was a crime novel. I did not think it was a crime novel. The first time I knew it was considered crime was they put it on the shelf in the crime section, and it got nominated for crime. Well, not nominated. It was given Crime Book of the Month at Dimmicks, which is like a big series of bookstores in Australia. And I was like, interesting. And these are things that I was discovering as the book was coming out. Even though the cover was very sort of like accessible literary fiction, and it was very quickly adopted as a crime novel, and I was a little bit resistant to that at first, and then I realized, like, well, this is a way to get the book read and unexpectedly win some prizes and get embraced by this community. So I really wasn't thinking about true crime. I wasn't thinking about those sort of bigger questions about exploitation. that we're having now when I was writing the story. I was, however, thinking, because the idea had come based on a true life, well, a true case, a real case, in Melbourne on my street. Renee Lau, young visitor to the country, was murdered in the early hours of the morning on my street. Body was found by a jogger. And in a place where I would often go for a run, but I was like hungover on that Sunday morning, so I didn't go for a run, and that the idea had come from what would it have been like if I had been the one going for a run that morning and found this young woman's body in a clearly traumatized, compromised position. And for a long time I grappled with how to write that story because it had come from this real life. In this case, so she was visiting from Hong Kong, and it didn't really get the media attention that, for example, a case just over a year before, a young woman who worked for the ABC network in Australia had gotten, and people marched in the streets, and it was Jomar, which was incredibly important and incredibly moving. And with Renee Lau, though, there was like nothing. It was almost like radio silence, and there was some flowers under the tree where she's been. And I used to go because it was in my neighborhood, a couple of blocks away. I would go and sit under that tree sometimes, especially after the flowers had gone, and there was just nothing there to mark it. And I would think, I've got this idea for a story. Would it be exploiting you to do that? So I really grappled with that, quite personal. And then, there's me essentially having conversations with a young woman who's no longer with us, who I never met. And I'm kind of even only seeing in the telling of the story now the parallels between Ruby and Alice and that connection, because I was so careful. So I set the story in a whole different place. I made sure that the details couldn't cross over in any way except for the essence of it, which was that a young woman was just going about her business at like 4 or 5 in the morning, in a place that she should have been safe, or we should be safe anywhere. But a place that people took for granted as being safe, and somebody very carelessly and callously decides to enact, terrible violence against her. So that was my big question, of like how not to exploit the case that, for want of a better word, had inspired me. And so I gave Lenny Lau is named for Renee Lau. I gave her the surname, and I would always come back to, if she could know that the part she played in the story, would this be okay? Like, have I gone too far? Am I saying too much? Like, would this be okay? Again, like the caveat that my story is complete fiction, but that was the genesis or the origin of that. But with the second book, I'd won some crime awards. I was, being feted as, which is so strange, like pushing against the tropes, and this new kind of breed of psychological thriller writers. I was like, oh wow, yay, thanks. Like it was I could no longer claim that it was accidental. And so then, as I was writing about, and especially in the second book, writing about like child murder, I just really thought, I don't listen to much that's a step backwards, but I don't listen to much true crime. I don't really listen to podcasts at all, because I don't drive. And I don't catch trains or buses or trams like I would have back in Melbourne. I live here in New Plymouth, that if I go for a walk, I might listen to some music, because otherwise I wouldn't get to listen to, I can't have music on when I'm writing. So I listen to music instead of podcasts. I would listen to My Favorite Murder, and I definitely have a deep dives into things I'm interested in, like the Golden State Killer, but the whole bigger story around the journalist, or the true crime writer who ended up losing her life in the writing of the story of uncovering the Golden State Killer. Like, I can go deep dive into all of those things, but it's usually short, sharp bursts. I'm not someone who listens, to finishes one true crime podcast and then goes on to the next one. I just tend to like pick a case and then know pretty much everything about it, to the point that, I could be an expert witness or something if such things were allowed. And so, to your question, like paying attention to the how not to exploit, I really would mostly think about what upset me, and a lot of it was like TV and film, and growing up in the 80s and with like 70s films. watching on VHS and 80s films and television, and just the brutality enacted upon women's bodies in particular, and how that was never the point of the story. It was always the jumping off point of the hero's journey to like, and the only time a woman was ever strong and fierce was if she'd been harmed, and it was like a revenge thing, like she was getting revenge against her aggressors. And I just have no, I can't watch those. I can't watch those films. I can't watch those TV shows. They actually make me have a physical, like I feel physically sick. I like literally will back up the couch or something and be like, oh, okay, I need to turn this off because I'm having a really visceral reaction. So it comes naturally to me to not do that to a reader. Like I want someone to be, I mentioned before, like I want to get my point across and I want to entertain them, but then like drop something in that hopefully is a bit like that got me in the feels, but I don't want them to be traumatized. There's too much out there already. I don't want them to be traumatized. I don't want to leave so many gaps that you can fill them in with worse things than, because I know what happened to my characters. So I want to say just enough. Like you don't have to go and imagine the worst things. I'll tell you what they are, but just enough. I don't need to describe exactly what happened or how many times I just think of myself, which is not hopefully as narcissistic as it seems. I just think, well, what would traumatize me? And then to the bigger question of why we are, women in particular, what they massively overrepresented in terms of the consumption of true crime. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's as simple as it. In the end, they just started talking to us. They started making things for us, and I say us like is it because and like a lot of people say, oh, it's because women want to sort of see, there's that theory of we want to see like how we might survive. Other theories are like we want to like go into the dark places because they exist already in our psyches. I lean into that a little bit. But I also just think it was like, oh, they started talking to us, like the My Favorite Murder women, like they said they were like using humor to diffuse these really dark stories, but things that we already were like always around us, but they were never written or spoken about for us. They were never shown for us. We were always being observed. That whole, we were always being looked at, and now they've started to tell them, certainly in the last decade, to tell the stories as if we are finally at the center of those stories. So maybe it's a little bit that, I don't know. There's people who are sort of far more clever than me, but I don't think it's as simple as, oh, we just like, we're so like walking around so, in the darkest parts of our like so like terrified or whatever, that we like to listen to these things and watch the bad things happen to someone else. I don't actually prescribe to that as much as perhaps some theorists do.
Yeah, and I guess it's all subjective as well, isn't it? I think but the answer might be all of those things
All of
that
those
you've
things,
just
exactly.
described, and
At
various
length,
levels.
then I
Yeah.
just went off on such. I was just looking off into space. Like, this is so good. I haven't spoken about this stuff for ages. So thank you for, thank you for listening while I
No,
work out what I actually think about the work that I'm doing.
thank you for sharing. That was a beautiful answer to the question. Right, before we wrap up, I want to actually talk a little bit about you specifically and your process for writing these stories in particular. So we've touched a little bit on the inspiration for those stories, which is fantastic. Obviously, you'll need to do a significant amount of research to, keep the stories safe and protect the people that you're talking about, protecting yourself. When in that space and you're spending so much time with stuff that is quite awful and, based on reality in some respects, how do you look after yourself?
Yeah, it's not as difficult as I think people would think it might be, because I'm really like, my characters sort of become my like mates, my friends, and I take them around with me. And so there are periods of time when I'm writing, I don't know, for example, my current character, Hannah, I've just left her sitting at a bar in New York City, and some annoying guy has just sat down next to her. And I get to have fun with, I actually don't know how I haven't decided how she's going to respond. I know where she needs to be in 20 minutes, but I don't know how. This is going to sound weird, but I didn't expect the guy to come and sit down next to her. That's how my writing process was. this guy's just come down. Of course he has, and he's taken up space, and let's see how she reacts to that. So a lot of my writing is really enjoyable. It's like really like, oh, I didn't know where you came from, and oh, that's an interesting thing you've just done, but I need you to do something else down here. So how do I work that out? And then so for the grim stuff, I sort of, it tends to be just pockets of time, and I can manage that quite well by much like when I would like deep dive into a particular case, like I'll deep dive into it and I'll stay up late and I will like check my cupboards and my like how the fuck could someone, I mean, I think there's a line of where like at the beginning of Leave the Girls Behind, where she's like, well, only a contortionist could fit into this cupboard, but I'm going to check it anyway. That comes from my kind of like, whoa, heightened awareness when I'm writing or reading about horrible things. But then I just, because also like my characters, I always give them really good friends outside of me as their friend and creator. I give them a really like support networks, and I give them love of things like musical theatre and things that I then rely on as well to take to, because the whole point of these stories, which then is how I apply it as the author of these stories, is it's not just about the worst moments. I'm not just interested in saying this terrible thing happened to this person. This is what like defines them. It's more like this terrible thing happened to this person, and look who that person was, and look who they could have been or been, as us Kiwis like to say. Look who they could have been. You, me, and Jacinda. Just been watching her interviews. The way she says "been" cracks me up. Yeah, look what they could have been if they had been just left alone. Fuck, just leave people like just leave people alone. And so yeah, I can reconcile all of that, and I know how bloody fortunate I am. Like going to see that show last night that I mentioned, they'd be like, Billy, far out, like what a like I mentioned, so like what a privilege to be able to do that kind of work. And like then I'm reminded that I'm privileged, and any emotion that I'm feeling, well, is it worth, when I'm writing or researching, can I put it into the book? Yes or no, because it's not something that I want to perpetuate or spread, so then it doesn't go into the book, and then I don't know, listen to a big showstopper something, watch Wicked, do something like that, and I'm fine. I'm really good at regulating.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love the concept of you making your characters your mates, having them with you. I think that's so beautiful.
It is, except for when they won't go away. So like, and I never want them to go away permanently, but when you need to bring in a new cast and then of characters, and it's sort of like like a long running soap opera or something, where then you suddenly get this new like family moves to town or whatever, and like you're just not going to get any screen time for a while. You need to step back. So it's it's an interesting process.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, it sounds like you've got a good grip, like you said, on regulating. Your process sounds robust. You look after yourself. You make sure you do this in a safe space. So that's wonderful.
You could ask other people though, and they'll be like, no, you like, every so often, I was gonna say perpetually, but maybe more like regularly, go a little bit nuts. So you're hard to be around, and that is true as well.
To the best of us, right? Who's not a little bit nuts?
You should be able to be a bit nuts and still have people love you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a testament to the wonderful conversation that we're having, that I'm getting a nod out the studio window that we've gone over time.
Of course we have.
But I've had the most wonderful time, and there probably is even space for a second conversation at some point. We can maybe sort that out.
Please, let's just do it every Friday.
Every Friday.
I'll treat it like a kind of therapy session, or like if you don't mind. Like
not even a little bit. I would love that. Excellent. I have a friend who's writing as well, so we might even throw in some, give us some author tips.
I'm around and looking for any distraction from the task at hand, which is finishing book 3. So
well, I'm happy to be an enabler for that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me here. It was lovely to have this amazing conversation, and we'll definitely talk to you again.
Thank you so much for the insightful questions and for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
This show is kindly supported by the Rainbow New Zealand Charitable Trust. The Rainbow Umbrella theme song is by Paul S. Allen and Beth. Check them out on Spotify. New episodes of The Rainbow Umbrella are available every fourth Thursday on Otago Access Radio, 105.4 FM, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. Do you have an idea for an episode or something you would like to kōrero about? Get in touch at rainbowumbrellapod@gmail.com.